grew up in a post-World War scenario in Europe and also seen the beginning of 21st century. And we are now near the ending of the first quarter of 21st century. The genetics in your times might be different. It has grown in a very different way. So, as a very senior person in this field, how do you see the entire journey from 70s to this many years? You might have seen the PCR also getting Nobel Prize, and you also see the CRISPR technology getting prizes also, and you also see same year you are seeing the stem cell therapies and gene therapies for sickle cell anemias in UK and USA. So how do you look back to the entire progression of genetics in these years?
I would say with one word, I was very lucky. I was very lucky to work on the genome and genetics in that period of time between, let's say, the end of the 70s up to now. Because my generation of scientists and physicians were proud to sequence the human DNA for the first time, the Genome Project. We're proud to identify almost all the genes. We're proud to identify most of the regulatory elements of the genome. And we're proud to crack down most of the so-called monogenic disorders due to a mutation or a variant, as we say now in our vocabulary, variants in single genes. And we talked about Down syndrome, but our laboratory has worked on several disorders due to single genes, starting from thalassemia, sickle cell disease, hemophilia, cystic fibrosis, and many other disorders, including many conditions of intellectual disability. So I was very lucky. And let me tell you, it was a roller coaster of excitement. Every year, there was an excitement of new things. So you hear very often today that, we have a bright future. I'm telling you, in 1970, we said we have a bright future. At the 80s, we said we have a bright future. In 90s, the same. In the 2000s, the same. 2010, the same. Every year and every decade, it was such an excitement, such an important joy to be in that field. And I do not see the end of it. I think it will continue to be like this in the next 50 years, because we have to answer, or the next generation has to answer many questions. What causes disorders? What's the mechanism of disorders? How the gene is involved in the human conditions? How the genome and the proteome interacts with the environment? Why some people with a bad mutation develop a disease and somebody else with the same mutation does not develop a disease? In our language, we call this penetrance. That's a mega question. What is the mechanism of a penetrance? And then, once we learn all this, how to treat. Because the people out there, our brothers and sisters and our sons and daughters and our mothers and fathers and ourselves, we care about treatments. But treatments do not come down from the sky. We have to understand and then treat.
So where do we see the zenith of this journey, or the last station of this journey? If still we are talking about the bright future, what would be the brightest point in the future where you will say, no, we have reached to the ultimate understanding of genomics?
That's a difficult question, because the human disorders that are due to the genome, there are thousands. And for each one, there's a turning point moment. For a very rare disorder that affects 1 in 100,000 individuals, the turning point is when we identify a treatment for that particular disorder very early on, and to treat the cause and not the symptoms. So for each one of them, there's a turning point. I give you an example. Let's take a disorder of blood coagulation that's called hemophilia. The turning point in hemophilia was when where the gene was identified and recombinant protein factor VIII was produced because of the genetic engineering. And when this protein is given to individuals, and we treat them. We do not treat them by gene therapy. We treat them by an exogenous protein that is identical to the human protein. So for each disorder is different. It's like you ask me, what is the most important point for humanity? I will ask the question differently. What's the most important point for you?
The zenith point of...
And for you, perhaps, is when you have your first child born, or when you got married, or when you got your degree. So, for people, the important point is the treatment point for their particular disorder.
Correct. So I would like to ask that the way we understand the genetics, so has it changed the perceptions to see and look at the human body in these many years? And you also deal with genetics and intelligence. So have you really find out what exactly is intelligence? Like what we really call. Don't you think that some person who has a genetic mutation might have a different kind of intelligence than what you and I may have, but we are not able to see it because their way of functioning or interaction may be different from ours, but biologically they are surviving. So what's your opinion on this?
So intelligence, as every other biological determinant, has a variation. And most people are between point A and point B in that variation that we call normal. So there are normal people with high intelligence and normal people with less than high intelligence. But they are all within the normal range. There are some individuals that are way outside the normal range. They have a very much lower intelligence than the mean. And the reason why that is because there are variants, mutations, in some genes. I said some, but I would say many genes. There are probably 2,000 genes that if they have mutations, each one of them, they result in intellectual dysfunction. So the level of cognition definitely depends on the different genes in our genome, definitely. Of course, the level of cognitive function also depends on the environment. I give you an example that every student of genetics knows. There's a rare human disorder that's called phenylketonuria, in which people in the blood, they have a high amount of a substance called phenylalanine. Why that is? Because they have a defective gene that produces a defective protein that does not metabolize that chemical. And that's a genetic disorder. Now, if you have that genetic disorder that's called phenylketonuria, and you drink milk without that substance, phenylalanine, or food without that substance, phenylalanine, you develop normally. If you eat food with normal amount of phenylalanine, you develop an intellectual disability and neurological defects and other defects. All right. So that disorder is, you can look at it from both sides. It is a genetic disorder because the genes are defective, And it is an environmental disorder because you see it when you give the individual phenylalanine. So the intellectual level is the product, is likely to be the product of the interaction between the genetics and the environment.
Correct. Another question I would like to ask, that you spent your entire career in Johns Hopkins and in Geneva.
Yes.
So you must have been working with the big names of medicine field and top-notch scientists also. So with whom you were associated all through years, who has inspired you, or whom you have inspired, or you worked together? So if you can name few names.
Few names,
Yeah.
yes. I was a student of Professor Victor McCusick. He was my mentor. And Victor was one of the founders of human genetics, not only in the United States, but in the world too. So I was very lucky that I was his student, and he was my mentor, and I learned a lot from him. And also the environment that he had created at the Johns Hopkins University at the time. Yeah. There are many others, but I will mention only him. And of course, the success of research laboratories depends on the caliber and the abilities and the ambitions and the ideas of people that work with you. And I think the secret is to recruit people that are better than you. Because if you select people that are as good as you are or a bit less, you may have good control on them, but they will not contribute that much. Okay. Well, if you have better people, you probably have less control, but it doesn't matter in science. But they bring ideas, okay, and they bring enthusiasm, and they bring alternative ways of attacking a problem. Okay. So if there's a message for the younger scientists or scientists is choose your collaborators well, and choose the ones that are better than you.
Can you elaborate this thing with some example or something from your experience without naming? So I think it would be very much useful for people to how to run an organization.
Yeah. Well, that is so common that I do not have any specific example in my mind. You know, when you run a sizable laboratory and a sizable clinic, and you have responsibilities, administrative responsibilities, either in the academia or a research center or a university or in the industry, the time that you need to think is quite limited, and is also contaminated by all these other things. So the pollution of all the other things that you have in mind and you have in your agenda to do per day. And then you go to the laboratory and you talk to your colleagues, and you hear a new idea, a new way of doing things, an alternative method, something that it's a bit unusual, a bit crazy, undoable, that you may say in the beginning, oh, that's nothing. And then you walk back to your office and you say, this girl may be right, or this fellow is probably thinking more ahead than me.
Then had you approached that person back and you approached that person and talked about it, or do you really utilize your authority and power to enable him what or he or she wants to do?
Well, of course, the first, because authority and power in science, I tell you, does not go far. Okay. It may go far in other fields, but not really in science, because the science is made by the agora of people, the collection of minds, and if you put the hierarchy on this, you kill innovation. That's my impression.
Correct. Doctor, how did you face the failures in your life?
As you know, when you do an experiment, 9 out of 10 times the experiment fails. So failure is the everyday life of a scientist. So it's not unusual. And you need to try again, and you need to understand sometimes, or most of the times, that what you did was wrong. And you need to change your strategy, you need to change your method, you need to change the way of thinking. And sometimes you need to abandon a project. There was a very wise mind in the UK, Sir Peter Medawar, who said that a scientist needs to study something that can be answered. Because sometimes you attack a problem that cannot be answered with the present technology or the present time in history. And you have to realize what is doable and what is not. And also you have to take calculated risks. A risk of 10% is acceptable. A risk of 100% perhaps is not acceptable.
So in your journey, any point of time did you feel that the people around you are not understanding you, or you feel that what kind of work I am doing, which might not be recognized by the people who are surrounded, non-scientific people, those people who are most interested in FIFA matches, more interested in politics, more interested in Hollywood films. So didn't you feel that the things that you're doing for greater good of mankind, and the mankind itself is not able to appreciate and understand what you're exactly doing? Have you ever felt that any point of time?
Well, look, when the people that count are your peers, and you have to convince them, and then convince, of course, the funding agencies, but the funding agencies are your peers too. So you need to convince your peers that what you want to do is important, innovative, useful, and the opinion of others do not really mind that much. Do not really count that much, excuse me. I did not tell you, but I was born in Greece and raised in Greece, and I was bombarded with the classic education of ancient Greece. So there was one philosopher, Socrates, who said, "Do not worry what the majority of people say, but you need to worry of what the people that know say." So that's what I'm saying. It's useless to pay attention to what the whole society in general says about something, because you don't share the same knowledge, you don't share the same goals, the same objectives. You don't share the same knowledge about technology, about what is possible, what is not possible, what is coming in the next 3, 4, 5 years. And the people that know this are your peers, the people that share the same experiences with you, and then you need to convince them. Now, sometimes you have an idea that you cannot convince anyone that is new and innovative. There may be a problem, because you need to, in order to do your research, you need funding. And as I said, funding comes from peers, comes from society, but it funnels down to whoever will judge whatever you have to do.
But do you really think that the more we know, the more we solve, or the more we know, the more problem we get into? So what's your experience regarding that?
Well, I would say the more we know, the more the more you get away from the other. Knowledge, I think, of course, knowledge unifies us, but knowledge separates us too. And we diverge. And then the effort is to put people together back, the so-called interdisciplinary type of research. You take a mathematician and you put with a biologist, with a physicist, with an ethicist, and all of them go towards a specific goal. But at the end, the idea, and that's my personal opinion, of course, the idea and the final objective, if you go from the generality to the specific, it's debated by the people that can debate this with appropriate knowledge and appropriate experience.
But do you think that all this genetic knowledge that we are gathering, we are experiencing, we are going through, will make us superior from other species without going through a natural process? And it will be detrimental to the humankind?
Well, I would not say we make superior from other species. I would say makes us more wise within our species.
Okay. Okay. Last question I would like to ask, that lots of young people in India are watching you. What advice would you give to the young Indian scientist who is watching this interview from a remote village in Kolkata, in West Bengal, or remote village in Jammu Kashmir or Gujarat? So it will be telecasted to all over India. So I just would like to ask that what would you tell that person, that scientist might not be in the lab, that the scientist might be inside, the curious person who is seeking answers to the questions that is not letting him sleep every night. So what would you tell him?
I would say follow your dreams. I would say being obsessed with what you love. And in life, if you can, do whatever you like to do, whatever drives you. And have a good training. Try to get the best teachers, and if you go to science, you try to get the best pedigree, the best mentors, because it is very important to have excellent mentors, and then after that you develop your own contributions.
Thank you, Dr. Stylianos, for talking to us. It was really word of wisdom and a journey. And it was like a time travel from your days in Geneva, from your early days to these years that we have seen, and almost 50 years of your journey that we experienced over here. And I'm sure that our audience, our people, our viewer will be really inspired from that. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for your invitation and your interest in science.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.